A large amount of data collected on many personality characteristics has enabled broad statistical correlations to be found. The five-factor model is based on these correlations. It has a significant following among academic psychologists and is currently used by the UK National Clinical Assessment Service to assess doctors in difficulty. According to the model, the numerous characteristics that have been studied fall into 5 groups that correlate with each other in individuals. For example, the traits for ease of making friends, comfort level in a busy social setting, and frustration with solitude all tend to occur together in the same person. Rarely does someone who makes friends easily feel uncomfortable in a social setting and prefer solitude. These traits are correlated. On the other hand, laziness occurs together with friendliness no more often than would be expected by chance. These traits are not correlated and are said to be orthogonal. This places friendliness, sociability, and dislike of solitude in the same factor and laziness in a different factor. The 5 factors described in the model are summarized by the acronym OCEAN for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The 5-factor model is one of many. It has its detractors, but it is an important tool in mainstream psychological research and is the most firmly evidence-based system. However, it is relatively insensitive to the subtle nuances of personality that a keen observer might note and record. Other systems, though less scientifically rigorous, come with more engaging narrative descriptions of personality types. Each factor is a cluster of correlated traits. For example, extroversion includes gregariousness, assertiveness, excitement-seeking, warmth, activity, and positive emotions. The model originates from Francis Galton's lexical hypothesis that significant and socially relevant differences in people's personalities enter their language, and that by sampling language for relevant words, it's possible to classify human personality traits. This was put into practice by Allport and Odbert, who extracted 17,953 personality-describing words from English dictionaries. These were refined through testing by others so that 16 major personality factors were identified, and this led to the development of the 16-item personality questionnaire, from which 5 groupings of characteristics were derived. Lewis Goldberg found the same 5 factors independently using language analysis, and later coined the term Big Five as a label for the factors. It was initially thought that personality tests could not predict behavior with much reliability, because attitudes and behavior vary so much depending upon the situation. This view was challenged during the 1980s, when researchers found that they could predict patterns of behavior by aggregating large numbers of observations. As a result, correlations between personality and behavior increased substantially. Personality and social psychologists now generally agree that both personality and situation are needed to account for human behavior. 2 questionnaires are now widely used to identify the Big Five. These are the NEO 5-factor personality inventory, NEO-PI, and the Hogan personality inventory, HPI. Both are designed specifically for use in occupational assessments and are used widely in industry and the public sector. The NEO-PI is used by the UK National Clinical Assessment Service in its psychological assessment of doctors and dentists who get into difficulties. The Big Five model has been extensively researched since the 1990s. Longitudinal data that correlate people's test scores over time and cross-sectional data that compare personality levels between different groups show a reasonable stability in personality traits during adulthood. However, more recent research and meta-analyses of previous studies indicate that change occurs in all 5 traits at various points in our lifespan. There is now evidence for a maturation effect, with levels of agreeableness and conscientiousness typically increasing with time, while extroversion, neuroticism, and openness tend to decrease. All 5 factors show the influence of both heredity and environment. Twin studies suggest that they contribute in roughly equal proportions. Barrick and Mount found that conscientiousness in the workplace showed consistent correlation with all job performance criteria for all occupational groups, and extroversion was a valid predictor for good performance in occupations involving high levels of social interaction, like management and sales. Also, extroversion and openness to experience were valid predictors of training proficiency. The Big 5 personality traits are group-based empirical observations, rather than a theory of mind. These observations remain to be explained. While this doesn't mean that the 5 factors don't exist, the underlying causes behind them are unknown. For example, sensation-seeking and cheerfulness are not linked to extroversion because of an underlying theory about how the mind works. This relationship is just what we observe and remains to be explained. Additionally, the correlations observed suggest group trends. For groups of people, sensation-seeking and extroversion tend to correlate. For individuals, sensation-seeking will less frequently be observed in more introverted individuals. Furthermore, the Big 5 do not explain all aspects of human personality. The model neglects domains such as being religious, manipulative, Machiavellian, honest, self-aware, thrifty, masculine or feminine, snobbish or humorous. The method used to identify the 5 factors depends on some degree of interpretation by statisticians. There is no universally agreed way of choosing how many factors to include. In many studies, the 5 factors are not fully independent of one another or orthogonal. Negative correlations often appear between neuroticism and extroversion, indicating that those who are more prone to experiencing negative emotions tend to be less talkative and outgoing. Thus, the 5-factor model may not provide a comprehensive description of personality with the minimum number of variables. There may be redundant factors. This has led to disputes about the true number of factors. Some have found 7 factors, some 18, and some only 3. Proponents of the Big 5 respond that although other solutions may be viable in a single dataset, only the 5-factor structure consistently replicates across different studies. What determines the eventual number of factors is essentially the kind of information that is put into the factor analysis in the first place. A final criticism is that much of the evidence relies on self-report questionnaires. Self-report bias and falsification of responses are difficult to deal with and account for. Differences in scores may represent genuine underlying personality differences, or they may simply be an artifact of the way in which subjects answer the questions. While the Big 5 model is highly scientific, it has one major drawback. It does not lend itself to giving descriptions of different types of people we can recognize in ourselves and others. For that, we turn to other systems.